Hey everybody, this is Gaynor Meilke with Plan C Training and the Conscious Success Plan for Life. And one of the most important pieces of life is, of course, family. That's our connection, and nowhere does that matter more than with parenting and children. At least that's what I believe. And it's one of the reasons that I became a conscious parenting mentor by going through the work and certification program of Dr. Shafali, who is Oprah's favorite parenting expert. And I just thought that her approach was amazing and so needed in the world today. So I want to walk you through what conscious parenting is and why we need it in this chaotic world and even before the chaotic world, uh, by presenting some of the highlights and key points of the Parenting Map, which is a book by Dr. Shafali, and it's something that I use in our work with speaking and then also working with families and doing workshops and content around conscious parenting as part of our conscious success plan. So I think one of the most important things that we can do today is define what is conscious parenting. And it's parenting from awareness, parenting without ego, and parenting as self-growth. So instead of looking at your child as a problem, we turn around the mirror and say, our child's behavior is an indication that something that we are feeling or doing is not creating the connection that we want with our child, and it's creating conflict instead, or an outcome that is not serving us. So, what do we do about that? Oftentimes, we need to look at our own selves and decide that maybe our ego is showing up, that we want our children to be different than our children are. And children are not an extension of us, they are their own unique people, which makes them so amazing and wonderful, but that can also create friction if you are expecting something that is different than what is. And so that's where our ego can come out in aggression. It can come out in running away. And we go through all of these different parent and people patterns. So you might be a fixer, you might be a fleer, you might be a fighter, you might be a fawner, and there's 5 different types of parenting styles that are all based on human behavior. So we go through that in conscious parenting. So you can identify your style and then also your child's style and see where perhaps there's a mismatch there. So parenting really is a journey of self-growth, and conscious parenting looks at children as our awakeners. So one of my favorite questions to start out with is, of course, who here has children? And if you have a child, what was your movie like of what that child would be like before you had them? So think about that as we're going through here, because remember, the movie that you have in your head is not reality. It's what you want to have happen. And when you project what you want to have happen into real life, it doesn't always align. And that's an ego trip, which can also trip you up as a parent in the short term, the medium term, and the long term. So why does this matter? Just as we said, in the medium term and short term, it reduces conflict, it strengthens connection, it builds emotional resilience, and creates long-term relational health. And I know that you've probably seen something about ACEs if you're a parent or maybe in the news, and ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. And it has been proven through research and scientific studies that the more ACEs somebody has, the poorer their long-term outcomes are, not only for relationships, but for their mental and physical health. And that's why there's so much talk these days about trauma. So there's little t trauma and big T trauma. And we tend to think of ACEs as more of the big T trauma, which they are, but there's 12 of them. And some examples are if you have a parent who's incarcerated, divorce, which is happening more and more frequently, abuse, whether that's verbal, psychological, um, or physical, sexual abuse is one. Any kind of childhood illness that's long term. So if a child has cancer or an eating disorder or some kind of other disorder, uh, a parent who has a mental illness or an addiction. So there's a list of these big T traumas, but then on a day-to-day basis, all of us probably experience little T traumas just from our egos as humans oftentimes taking the front seat. And so, again, our expectations are different on the inside than what is happening on the outside, and that creates friction. It can create friction with a partner, it can create friction with an employer, it can create friction with your child's teacher. And until we turn more inwards and look at why are we being triggered and what can we do, which is the awakening stage of the 3 stages of transformation in conscious parenting and in life, we're not going to get very far in the transformation where we're actually showing up differently, thinking differently about situations, and interacting differently as well. So that's where, when we do those things over time, we actually manifest better relationships. And it's so important these days to really understand your patterns, because your own childhood conditioning, your inherited beliefs from your family and from culture fuel automatic reactions. And so when those conditioning, inherited beliefs, and automatic reactions come together in a negative way that can impact other people negatively, including children, that becomes toxic. And one of the reasons why I feel it's so important to nip this in the bud and be aware of it as a parent is because you're setting your child's patterns for relationships, how they feel about themselves, and the way they interact with the world right now. So if you give them an unhealthy map, so to speak, they are going to probably have some issues down the road. So the parental ego shows up in a number of different ways. One being control. Anything from, you must eat your vegetables every time they're served, to you can't go out tonight because I said so and you have a test and it's a big argument, to fear. No, you can't do that because it makes me uncomfortable. Or if my child is doing this, I'm not going to be accepted in my friend group, like not giving them a phone for a, until it's age appropriate. Perfectionism. I'm running myself ragged, taking these kids to 15 activities every week to keep up with the Joneses so they don't miss out on any potential opportunities or scholarships. And it's actually making you show up um, as stressed and tired and not able to enjoy the present moment with your kids or your family or anybody else. And comparison. Oh, my child was not picked to be first string in the soccer team. Wow, it's not fair. that that's happened. And that can show up in a lot of different ways. Or, wow, why can't you be more like your sister? Or, Jamie down the street just got a scholarship. Wow. It's so disappointing that you didn't make it that far. So lots of different ways, and I'm giving some kind of extreme examples, but I have seen these play out in real life. Both my daughter was on a synchronized skating team, so if you think that there might be some parental ego involved in that discipline, you would be correct. And then just in working with clients and coaching people, we all have an ego, and the ego drive is not necessarily always 100% negative. It can be healthy because it gives us motivation and makes us take care of ourselves and try to protect ourselves. It's when it gets out of hand and we start to see some of our ego in its negative forms reflecting back at us through our children. So behavior is often communication. So I gave the example a minute ago of perfectionism in parenting where you're, you know, running these kids around to all these activities and you have to do like the PTA and it's got to be perfect and the cupcakes for the class and the birthday parties and all those things. And you have kids who talk back, they're not grateful. They're, they're melting down. They want their devices. They don't want to talk to you. They're, not doing well, interacting with each other. Oftentimes, that's because they're overstimulated, overtired, and they feel like they're not getting your attention. You might be with them physically, but emotionally and mentally and on a connected level, you're not with them. Same is true when you give your kid a device. And triggers when your kid is demanding the device and you want to be the good parent and like not let them have too much screen time, they start to melt down and then you get mad because they should just listen to you. I want you to back up and think about not only why am I getting upset with that? Because you just want them to listen to you because you said so, and that's your ego and controlling them. But also, who gave them the device? So it's not your kid's fault that they're addicted to their tech. They weren't born with that. It's because they've been taught by the adults in their lives that that is like a pacifier. And I do want to just pause here because I think this is a message that anybody who is a caregiver for a child or for your own self, the technology is not only bad in the short term because it doesn't promote connection and it doesn't develop other parts of the brain and psyche and sociological connection, but it also creates addiction circuits in the brain. And children are even more susceptible because their brains are still developing. So giving your kid an app on a phone or a game on a phone on a regular basis is like giving them alcohol and drugs. So I want you to think about that. And if you want more information about the science behind this, um, I would be happy to share that with you. So awakening practices, we've got a number of different ways, and we teach a lot of these in our workshops and in our courses. But awakening practices are things to get you in touch with how you're feeling and why your patterns are showing up the way that they are. Just being aware and allowing yourself some time and space to actually check in with yourself. And then when you do find yourself triggered, journaling, and I don't mean on a phone, I actually mean with a pad and pencil, because research has shown that that is a much more effective way to release feelings and gain clarity than anything that you can do on a digital device. So one of my favorite practices for trigger journaling is called Rage on the Page. So when you find yourself feeling frustrated or upset or angry, before you put it out into the world, having 2 minutes to just dump it all out on a piece of paper can be very productive. So that's just one little practice that you can take away. The second stage is transformation. So it's really releasing what the old patterns are, letting go of control, rewriting internal narratives, and choosing presence over reactivity. And I know this sounds like simple, but it does take time. And I think it's also important, it takes compassion with yourself because we've all learned things as we've gone along. This is what we do in life. Doesn't make you good or bad or indifferent. It just makes you human. But where the power lies is in the awareness and then taking action. So we do a lot of coaching around this, and I can share that with you as well later on. So emotional regulation for parents is really important, just like it's important for kids. And I know we'll definitely dive deeper into this with some actionable strategies and practical tools. But grounding tools, you can even, have alternative medicine practitioners um, who can work with you on this. Nervous system awareness, one of the things is just to get more in touch with your body, and that can be done when you're out in nature, taking a walk, breathing in, just closing your eyes and putting your hand here and breathing, and you automatically feel more grounded in your body. So you're not just keeping all of the thoughts up here, you're connecting to how you're feeling in here and your stomach. And there can be all kinds of negative physical outcomes when we're not emotionally regulated. And then co-regulation with your child. Sometimes you both need a timeout and you can do that together. And that can be very powerful, not only because it helps you co-regulate, whether that's in a hug with a rocking chair, going for a walk, but it shows your child the practice of co-regulation too. So conscious communication is another really important part of conscious parenting. So listening to your child without an agenda. So for example, even from birth, when the baby cries, you might be thinking, oh, I've got to calm this baby down because I'm going to be on a meeting for work and all these things. Well, your baby doesn't know that. And so being able to attune and create enough space to do so is important. So what do you do with a crying baby and a work meeting? I think you have to be honest. If you're doing things remotely from home, hopefully your employer will understand, or you know, get some help. And sometimes people will not get help to look after their kids, and that can be really detrimental. But also speaking without blame to your child instead of saying, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe that you spilled the milk again." It's like, "Oh, the milk got spilled again. I wonder what we could do next time to make that not happen." And here's a cloth. Would you please help me clean it up so we can do it together? It'll be faster and then we can do something fun. So connecting before correcting is always important. And in the parenting map, the VENT framework is also very helpful. So you can think about it, like validate the emotion if your child's having a meltdown because one of their kids or one of their friends didn't invite them to a uh, event with other kids. then you want to validate that and say, wow, that's got to feel really rough because you always try to include everybody. You know, I know what that feels like, and that's the empathizing part. It sure uh, doesn't feel good when somebody leaves you out of their friend circle. I've had that happen. Normalize it. In fact, that happens all the time, and most of the time, people don't even realize that that's the case. So it's really not about you transforming it into, but you remember what this feels like so that when you have your next party, you make sure everybody's included. Now, what could we do instead since we'll have some extra time together this weekend? Those are great ways to use the VENT framework. And then transformation practices for ourselves. This is like a daily, hour by hour practice of breathing, connecting to yourself, reframing. Wow, my kid will not get out of bed this morning. They're just trying to like drive me crazy and make me late for work instead of understanding that maybe they're overtired too, and it's hard to get out of bed in the winter when it's warm. So maybe I could cuddle them for a minute to make it a little easier transition. But if I happen to lose it, then I also need to make sure that I repair. So I'm so sorry that I got frustrated because you wouldn't get out of bed this morning. That wasn't my intention. It was just me getting worried that my boss wasn't going to be happy that I would be late for work if we didn't get on to our day quickly enough. But maybe I'll set the alarm 5 minutes earlier so that you have more time to wake up at your own pace. How does that sound? And then the manifestation. This is where we're actually creating a whole conscious home. And doesn't that sound idyllic and nice? But it's really putting things into practice and for your family, really saying that we want a better way of doing things so that it's predictable, that people are attuned to each other, that we don't think that other people are out to get us in our own family, creating emotional safety. So the idea is really boundaries with love and making it clear like what is acceptable and what is not, but not in a controlling way, trying to collaborate for problem solving and create natural consequences. So, oh, you just pushed your sister down. Now she's hurt. You're going to have to spend some time apologizing to her and then coming up with a plan so that your behavior doesn't continue because it's not acceptable in our house. And then empowering authenticity. So, what does autonomy look like? What does emotional expression look like? And then parenting based on your strengths. You may not like conflict, but that could mean that instead of just automatically running from things and not dealing with it, instead you come up with some creative ideas so that when people are in conflict, you can have maybe a deck of index cards where you have questions. Can you tell me about, how you're feeling so that you don't have to come up with that on the fly or learning to sit with the uncomfortableness of somebody being angry with you. And I think those are all things that can empower your authentic way of interacting with your kids and your family. So, conscious discipline is all about teaching, not punishing, co-regulation, and problem solving as well. So, manifestation practices, some things to think about are having daily rituals that you do together as a family that can help you de-stress, like taking a walk around the block every night or watching 15 minutes of a funny show or playing board games or even doing yoga together. Having family agreements on how you handle conflict and what the boundaries are, and check-ins to see how people are doing. Family meetings are always good. And I know some of these things sound trite, but in order for you to be able to see the benefits of taking a different approach to parenting, you do have to be consistent with it and also get feedback too. So, some real life scenarios where these things can actually make a difference are tantrum, sibling conflict, the screen time debate, homework battles, but even deeper than that are as kids get older and they run into bigger roadblocks, by putting a good foundation in now, you're going to be able to be somebody that your kids can turn to, and you have to expect that they're going to make some mistakes and that it's up to you to set the boundaries so that they don't wander into really dangerous territory. But if they wander into some undesirable territory, you want to, one, be compassionate that they are their own person and doesn't necessarily reflect on you. Each child is unique and will express themselves differently, but also to teach your children that even though they make a mistake, they can have self-compassion too. So it's definitely an ongoing journey. And there's lots of books out there. Some of the ones that I like are if you're just getting started, kind of looking inside at your own triggers, the book, The Awakened Family, What Happened to You, are good ones. And then Dr. Shafali has a podcast called Parenting with Dr. Shafali, Conscious Parenting with Dr. Shafali. The Parenting Map is a very good one. And then journaling prompts. I've got some cards that I brought here that have the conscious parenting tips on them. So you might want to journal about those, or just a daily practice of where you feel you're getting triggered and what your patterns are. But most importantly, having a community. And I think that's one thing that I'm happy that I could come and talk to you about developing either your own community or by joining our Plan C training community uh, and other communities, so that we kind of go back to what used to be a really effective um, parenting configuration. Even 50 years ago, we lived more in community than we do now. So think about having a conscious parenting circle. And if you want help getting started, you can certainly reach out to me. But those are really the key takeaways. I've got them summarized on some cards. If you'd like them and you're watching this in a recording, you can go to planctraining.com or Charisma Inc., fill out the contact form and just request those. Practicing gratitude, I think, is really important, but for a different reason than you think. The one of the many reasons that I actually wanted to come out and speak about this, and I've really kind of developed a secondary organization around it, is because I really think that raising children can be a very joyful experience, and I want everybody to feel that way. But I know a lot of people don't, and it's not only the child, but it's your life circumstance. So if you can help to understand what your triggers are, what your patterns are, and identify ways that you can work to change them, it's going to benefit not only you, but your children and any child or family member who comes into contact with you. And you might just make a change that will impact you, not only your life, but generations to come. So if you want more information, you can email me at gaynor@charismainc.com, or visit planctraining.com. And you can always reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn, and like and subscribe us on YouTube at Charisma Inc. Thank you.